Let's move on, because Kieran Shannon is with us this morning to talk to us about the quality of the football that we've been witnessing so far. Kieran, your piece this morning just reminds everybody that actually the Football Championship has been really good, with the obvious exception of the dinosaur in the room, but that there have been loads of good games, loads of progression made by various teams, and we should be paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, no more than yourselves. I suppose it's, the show there that you have, and myself, I suppose, have banging the drum about what way championship structure should be, but you can sometimes we've got to move on to what we actually have too, or appreciate what we have, and I think it's been a pleasantly surprising and enjoyable championship if you actually just go through the various provinces. I mean, it's hard to remember a kind of championship that was so satisfying, for the neutral, and between Roscommon winning the championship the way that they did win it, going to both Galway and Mayo, and beating them clean sheets, and great goals in both games, and obviously Conor Cox, etc. And yet you still have, and then yet the best game, all Connacht game, will be not in the Connacht Championship. Next Saturday, as you pointed out, it's 20 years since we've had a do or die Mayo game, and a do or die is the term in this sense that it could be the end of the road either for Kevin Walsh has been there 5 years. There's been a lot of incremental progress in that time, bit by bit, but the goal was to get to an All-Ireland final, lose this, and they're not even making the Super 8s, and obviously then with the Mayo team, as much as it's in transition, you'd have to think that it would be the end of the road for a core of 4 or 5 of that team. So that's a massive, that's intriguing. You go to Ulster, it's hard to remember as high scoring Ulster Championship, and as making the point, what has been a strength of Ulster football through the years, and particularly this year, has been the standard of its mid-cut. And you take a team like Armagh, it's been involved in 5 cracking games, and they were just, not too far away from having 9 games this summer if they had one up in Castlebar and one next weekend. So, and then, you go to Munster, and, it was interesting. I don't want to be John Hornbashing all the time, but, he works in shorthand a lot, and, I saw a term he had there today about how Munster's really 2 and 4. That's not the case, there's a case that Clare are every bit as good, if not better, than Cork, and, both Clare and Cork could be in the Super 8s, and both of them put it up to Kerry in their different ways. So as Munster Championship goes, that was pretty decent. And then, then we are left with Leinster, and obviously there is the whole issue of Dublin, but we had cracking hurling championships in the late noughties as well, even prior to Tip coming along in 2009, that were enjoyable. But it turned out, there was one team well ahead of the rest, and yet, Dublin will be tested in likely Omagh if Tyrone come out at the weekend in Game 3, which might mean Dublin have a number 2 seeding going into the semi-finals, and. Who would you pick to come out of the other group? You'll have the winner from Limerick in it. You'll have Donegal in it. You'll have Kerry in it. I mean, the prospect, I don't know what the television channels are going to do between either showing an All-Ireland hurling quarter-final or, Killarney hosting either Galway or Mayo. 2 teams who basically have, prematurely ended Kerry's championships the past 2 years. So they're cracking games to look forward to, and it's easy just sometimes to be cynical or whatever, just to think, Dublin 5-0 formality. There's a lot more going on this summer, and even though the championship could be better, and yourself and Kieran Donaghys, laid out a championship there a few weeks ago that you would love to see in reality. This is pretty good, what we're having, and it's really heating up now.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that struck me when we saw the proposals that were mentioned at the weekend that are going to go to the Special Congress this October. The fact that it doesn't really change anything for the Tier 1 counties. I mean, Donaghys' proposal was kind of this really exciting thing that you'd have big games every single week, and we have had good games this year. Is it too far of a stretch to say that if you didn't have the obvious example of Dublin's dominance, that the current championship structure is actually grand, it's actually fine, it's actually providing us with what we need during the summer?
Yeah, I don't think it is good enough. I mean, you take a county like Fermanagh, whereby they had they met Donegal in the first round, the Ulster Championship. They actually put it up to Donegal. You can talk about style of play, etc., but they really posed questions and a problem for them. It was 15-9 or 10 in the end, and then they gave Donegal. You could argue they're not necessarily the best team Donegal played in Ulster so far this year, but they gave them probably their toughest game. And then they're playing Monaghan and Clonus the next day, and that's it. Some are gone. 2 games. When you go through the National League, when it's on, like they were 4 for 5 in Division 2, hard-won games both. They came from behind to beat Donegal. The good teams went up there, lost, and so they had a decent year, and yet they had only 2 summer games. So it's not reflective. The new proposals, what I find, we are stuck with a fudge at the moment. John Horan is saying the fixtures group can still review it again. And okay, if he wants the principle of a Tier 2 established, and then it's only for 2020, and then the fixtures review can go about it for 2021. But, whatever is put in as a stopgap tends to be, a medium-term thing at least, and you're stuck with it for a few years. And what you have is next year, let's just stick with Tier 1 for the time being. You'll have 16 teams in it. You'll have, and then you'll have round 1, round 2 qualifiers. So a team could be gone after round 1, the equivalent of a Fermanagh again. And yet he's keeping in place the Super 8s. Why not have 4 groups of 4? If you want it like that, where teams are guaranteed 3 games, you can still reward the provincial winners, where they're the ones with the 2 home games, only 1 away, as opposed to 1 away and 2 win. Just even things like that. He's not guaranteeing, which, let's say, the proposal that you and Kieran were proposing on, is a meaningful program of games for teams during the summer. They'll argue, the clubs, but that's tokenistic. No one's worrying about the club player. He's not worrying about the club player in Dublin, because Dublin, he sees it, are playing until the 1st of September. So, is it okay for, counties like Fermanagh to have their county team, and they're supposed to be playing club fixtures in July, but and their county team only getting 1 game a year, guaranteed 1 game outside the provincial championship. So, the one thing. So there's all that frustration. I don't think there's been a meaningful debate within the GAA about how best the championship could be laid out. I don't know, or I doubt whether that fixtures review group has that scope when basically they're being imposed. I used the analogy last week in the column of it's a bit like, commissioning the Brennans to review the hotel, and yet Dermot Bannon's, fully at work doing his own thing and saying, right, there's your blank canvas, lads, work around that. It's not a blank canvas. It's an imposition, and it's a missed opportunity, perhaps. And so that is the frustration that, yes, we're getting a decent championship. Obviously, football hasn't been better in terms of, yes, I think, if you want to use it in such terms, we have more, I suppose, expansive, attractive, enterprising, high-scoring football now than we would have had maybe previously.
Yeah.
Teams are better prepared than ever, more skillful than ever. But the championship could still be more satisfying. And,
I think that's
the football year itself more satisfying.
I think that's exactly the point, that the games are potentially great. We have too few of them, and the wrong system to get more games out for all the teams, so that even the worst teams can get games and improve when the weather is good. The whole season is completely backwards. Anyway, we should actually talk about the games, because
we should, because we'll be into it forever, and again, that's why I wrote today for a change to go with what we have. And I didn't see any game live on Saturday evening myself. I was at a family event, but you're following it on Twitter. And then, you're obviously watching the highlights and just, following events from Mullingar and Castlebar and Portlaoise. It was just cracking stuff. It was a throwback to, I remember a great qualifier night in 2009 where, Sligo came within a penalty kick of knocking out Kerry. Donegal knocked out a highly fancied Derry team in overtime. Wicklow beat Down. It was back to that. And it reminded you that, the mid-cut is actually probably, whether it's an outlier or not, they're being really competitive this year. And so the appetite this weekend, you have games whereby like Cork Laois is going to be fascinating. I mean, it's the ultimate defining game in a way for let's say, particularly for Cork. I mean, there's a positive vibe in Cork which we haven't had too often in recent years. You have the promise of it occasionally, and this presents itself. I mean, if Cork win, they're in the Super 8s. Who could possibly take at least one game in the Super 8s? It would bring on that team so much. Lose in Thurles, and we're back to the old narrative of recent years. It's just a massive game and opportunity for both teams, and then obviously there's the Meath Clare game's intriguing. Tyrone Cavan unfortunately just has a sense of deja vu about it. It must be the last team Mickey Graham's men wanted to see come out of the draw. I mean, last year alone they were knocked out by Tyrone in a competitive qualifier, but you just think that's what Tyrone do. They take out teams in the last 12 rounds, particularly aside of the profile of Cavan. And then, obviously we have the big game in Limerick, and as we said with the Super 8s, it's going to be intriguing.
Kieran, on Mayo, we've seen the news this morning that Aidan O'Shea could potentially be out this weekend. They've got a really, really bad run of luck. Notwithstanding that and the idea that perhaps Mayo could go on another incredible run this year, is there anything different that you're noticing from, say, 2 years ago when they were in a similar-ish position where they should have got knocked out a couple of times in the back door, didn't, made an All-Ireland final and should have won it, really? Like, do they still have that? Do they still have that ability to go all the way, really, when it comes to Mayo? Like, these injuries are going to be the big talking point because they could just scupper everything, really, at this point, regardless of that mindset.
Yeah, well, I do think they're deeper though than other years. I mean, they've had. I remember, a pivotal game in the Galway Mayo rivalry was 2013. A year after Mayo were coming off their first All-Ireland final appearance on this run, and they had an injury crisis going into between the end of that league. They got to stayed up and played Dublin in the league semi-final, and then. There was an injury crisis going into the Galway game in Salt Hill, and they were down 4 or 5 key players, and produced probably their greatest provincial championship performance of the Horan era, Mark 1, and players stepped up in the void. Now you are looking at a position like midfield from where, on paper you were looking at, they had huge resources on paper. Tom Parsons wasn't going to be back this year, but you were looking at Jamie O'Shea. Obviously, Rowan was the find of the spring. Aidan had moved back there and was playing great stuff. Tony Vaughan is a backup there. Dermot O'Connor, likewise. Even Lee could give you minutes there. And now a lot of those options are gone. But I do find that the way that they use the league, that they can be more adaptable. It doesn't have, but Aidan O'Shea would be a massive loss for what he has brought to them, and look, Galway would have their dander up, but he may well play. It's the only thing is with the tick of the games, and this is possibly the disadvantage of them. It will be said afterwards that the Roscommon defeat was a careless and unnecessary one, and they're going through just the sheer run of games that they've had, because you're probably looking at, unless you're involved in the setup, you don't know the diagnosis of Aidan's injury, but you're even looking at the US last night leaving out Megan, because there's a final within 3 or 4 days. Do you leave him off in the hope that then the boys get through it, and that extra 10 days gives them time to recover for game 1 of the Super 8s down in Killarney? These are all the calculations. We're not privy to that. So, but of course, you'd want him there if the choice is there. He would be a loss, and I think Galway would take strength from it. But they have their own injury crisis, or in gaps. But yet, as Kevin Walsh said, it's allowed certain guys to get game time during the league, and there's going to be a reaction from them from the Connacht final collapse, you could argue, and. They have been a project of their own over the last few, 4 or 5 years. So it's going to be just It's going to be a massive game. You know, Limerick seems to bring out these epic games. I think we won't have anything like the crowd or the atmosphere of the famous game in 2014, but this is an era-defining game in many ways, or era-ending game in many ways.
How do you feel the two teams actually match up on the basis of what we've seen so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, they did play each other this year, and, you know, like Mayo had a very good spring. Yet if there was two results they would have wanted outside of winning a league final, it would have been either to, you know, maybe break the losing streak they have with both Galway and Dublin. And, you know, there has been if you were to pick a scoreline, like in how Galway are straight up, are geared, you know, to play Mayo, it's 111 or 112 to 12 points. That's the way. But you could see how Mayo were evolving at the end of that league. I remember Horan saying after the game, you know, there was a couple of things we saw. There was one or two goal chances that they had that night that they actually got in the league final. You take Andy Moran was coming out towards the 45. There was a runner behind. They got a goal like that in Tralee. Was it Kevin McLaughlin to Matthew Ruan? They've got a couple of goals like that, and Mayo will need at least a goal to beat Galway for, you know, for what it even represents as much as anything. You know, we've cracked you because Galway have been geared to win by that scoreline. I think Mayo know. It wouldn't surprise me if Mayo got that goal and therefore got the win. But so it could be something like 113-14 Mayo this time. You know, it's I still. Yeah, I don't see it being a 3-goal game, let's say, like last night or last Saturday was in Castlebar. But this is the test of, this will be a massive test of Mayo and particularly, you know, the brains trust that James has, because Galway do pose a question and they weren't able to crack it the last 4 years in league or championship, so it's a massive game.
All right, Kieran, good stuff. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks a million for joining us.
Okay, Joe. So,
Kieran Shannon giving us some thoughts on the imminent Mayo-Galway game.